The ancient Sumerians and Egyptians made beer some 5,000 years ago. They believed the gods taught them to make beer from bread, and that the starchy liquid was converted to alcohol by a miracle, and so they drank beer at religious festivals. Beer made its way into Europe during the Middle Ages. It's often reported that people drank wheat beer in preference over contaminated water, although this is probably not true. Hops, with their antibacterial properties, were likely introduced to beer in the 9th century. Before that, people drank gruit, which used herbs in the same way we would use hops now. My one and only attempt at making gruit was gently described by a friend as rosemary malt water, and probably best suited dressing lamb. We drank it, but it certainly wasn't real beer. Hops not only give beer its characteristic bitterness and craft beer those fruity aromas, but they also help to prevent undesirable organisms from taking over the yeast. In 1680, ANTONIE van Leeuwenhoek took his microscope lenses to beer, where he saw yeast globules for the first time. Until then, the yeast solution was believed to be inanimate, but Leeuwenhoek observed yeast budding and growing in volume. For the first time, the yeast organism had been identified. Beer was made by a living thing, although Leeuwenhoek believed them to come from flour. But how does yeast work? In 1789, the renowned French chemist Antoine Lavoisier was looking at wine fermentation and discovered that sugars were converted into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Then, in 1815, Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac's research into the triggers for fermentation started a flurry of research that described the life cycle of yeast. This included the method by which it multiplies, called budding or gamation. This is an asexual reproductive process where a new organism develops as a growth on the original. Despite all of this, it wasn't until 1857 that yeast was truly described. Louis Pasteur was looking at beer in an attempt to outdo Germany's brewing dominance. His experiments demonstrated that the live yeast microorganisms are responsible for converting sugars to alcohol in beer, along with a number of other organic compounds. He also identified that a bacteria called lactic acid can cause fermented drinks to sour, like the soured beers that are popular now. We now know that many of the flavours in beer come from yeast, and we have cultivated different strains to bring out different characteristics. So the next time you're knocking one back, give a thought to the rich scientific history and the billions of yeast cells that made your delicious beer. As the popular phrase goes, brewers make wort, yeast makes beer. Cheers.